Are you ready for debate night at Politicon 2017? All right. Well, let's bring them out, the people you've been waiting for. First, editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire and host of the Ben Shapiro Show, Ben Shapiro. All right. And founder and host of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur. All right. If you guys can be a little more excited, that would be great. All right, well, we're here to debate, and I'm going to start with Ben. Are you proud or disappointed in establishment GOP figures like John McCain, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins for their vote on health care?
So, I'm wildly disappointed with the entire party.
Fuck y'all.
There's a significant gap inside the Republican Party about whether this should even happen or not. There are people who believe that the Obamacare regulations are an affirmative good. There was an attempt to basically leave all the Obamacare regulations in place and just remove the funding mechanism, which would have led to the exacerbation of the death spiral. The truth about healthcare is this. There are three qualities of healthcare that you can have. You can have affordability, you can have universality, or you can have quality. And you can have two of those three things, but not all three. Right? You can have universality, affordability, or quality. Two of those three things you can have. And one of the things that's happened with Obamacare is that you've gotten closer to universality, but you haven't gotten any closer to either affordability or quality. And the Republican Party seems to be falling into the trap of basically just copying what the Democrats do, except being worse at it. What they actually need to do is relieve the regulatory burden that is driving up the cost of health care, and they need to stop acting as though insurance companies' jobs is actually just to reimburse people for their bad health. If you join up with an insurance company and your health sucks to begin with, you are going to pay more because it's an insurance company, not a charity. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have some form of backup for people who have pre-existing conditions. I would hope that the social fabric would help fill that in. This is why I'm a big believer in charity and churches and synagogues filling that gap. But what we can't do is suggest, as the Bernie Sanders left does, that health care is an inalienable right, and therefore you can put a gun to my wife's head, she's a doctor, and you can force her to provide care at any cost you want to pay. You can't do that and hope to increase the supply of health care. Health insurance is not health care. They're not the same thing. And anybody who tells you differently is lying or trying to sell you something.
No chance, so that's what you got. Up against a machine too strong.
Cenk, your take on the healthcare vote.
Great. Before I do that, first of all, welcome to the Thunderdome.
All right. Let's hear him speak.
Guys, wait till he does something. I mean,
in all seriousness,
What a fag.
in all seriousness, the reason that I kid around about that is that I really want to make sure that Ben's opinions are heard and my opinions are heard, and that there's an exchange of ideas. And believe it or not, there are some things that we do agree on, and what we won't be discussing those tonight. So on the issue of healthcare, let's get going. So the Democratic Party is incredibly proud that they defeated a bill that had 17% approval rating. It's a low bar, and I'm glad they held. The Republicans have a comical position, which is that why didn't the Democrats help us defeat Obamacare?
Don't make that face at me, young man.
Well, that's kind of because that was their idea, and why in God's green earth would they help you defeat their own plan? Now, is Obamacare enough? Not nearly. And there are a number of issues that we had as progressives with it, including lack of price controls. You left it in the hands of private insurance, and of course, them being corporations, which Ben kind of alluded to there, they're going to want to make money. And so that is very, very normal. And so I don't think that that was the right way to approach it, and it was originally a Heritage Foundation plan to begin with. So I believe that the right approach, and the one that Democrats should pursue next, although they probably won't, is Medicare for all. So real quick, let me explain why. Medicare polls at 77% and actually accomplishes the three things that Ben talked about. It's universal coverage, it is affordable, and actually gives you good insurance. That's why it polls at 77%. And Medicare for All now polling at 60%. Federally funded health insurance for everybody polling at 61%. So I tell to my Democratic friends, you might want to try something that's popular for a change. So, and finally, like on the idea that, hey, listen, everybody can't get health care. Well, this is not like furniture, which sometimes you allude to, Ben. You could have good furniture, bad furniture. I've had it all, right? That's optional. If you don't have good health care, you die. And so I view it as not something that capitalism should deal with, and I believe in capitalism, and I think they make great sneakers, but something that is about equality of opportunity, and you cannot have equality of opportunity if you're dead. So Medicare for all.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So a couple of notes in response to the Medicare for All shtick. So this is Bernie Sanders shtick, obviously. The problem with Medicare for All is that when people say that it's affordable, this isn't affordable to the person who has the Medicare. It is not affordable to the country. In fact, it is so unaffordable to the country that the state of California was a nut job leftist state, just refused to even pass Medicare for All because it would have immediately doubled the debt.
Be careful, Ben!
As far as the idea that medical care is a right, but it's not actually a good or a service, this is a way to make things less plentiful. If you declare things rights, but you don't actually incentivize the creation of those things, you don't get more of them. So the South African Constitution has right in there that healthcare is a right, that housing is a right. The fact is that you don't have good housing or healthcare in South Africa because just declaring things rights does not make them appear.
The racists are not, no.
What makes more things appear is a market-based system that creates more doctors, that creates more medical care, that creates more incentive for people to join up. So my wife is a doctor. That means she has to go through 1,000 years of medical training, and we have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to make her a doctor. The idea that you're going to have the government come in and then dictate the sort of care that she should provide to each particular patient, and then dictate how much she should be paid for that care, is going to lead to a decrease in the number of people who are going into the medical industry, which decreases the level of care overall. This is why I say that it is better to treat things as goods than as rights, because declaring something a right just means that you have the right to steal it from me. But declaring something a good means that you get a market process that leads to lower prices and better care over time. And the big problem we've had before Obamacare is that it was already treated quasi as a right. You had it heavily regulated on the state level. It is continually heavily regulated. The idea there's a completely unregulated market is absolute nonsense. The reason that you have employer-based health insurance in the first place was as a response to wage and price controls placed in the aftermath of World War II, and employers began giving health insurance as an actual good, right? They gave it as an actual incentive to their employees. If you had an actual individual-based health insurance market, you bought it just like you bought your car insurance, you would see more and better health care for everyone.
Yep. All right. So, Ben, I don't want to steal health insurance from you. I want you to be healthy. That's why I want Medicare for all.
Just want to take my money and my wife's services.
You're looking at the real deal now!
So, Republicans frame taxes as stealing. That's preposterous. So if we don't have taxes, well, we can't do all the things that we want to do as a community. Now, there are some things that we just talked about that we don't want to do as a community, we want to do as individuals. In fact, the things that we want to do as individuals are much greater. That's why we're a mixed economy, but largely capitalist. And I agree with that. And I run a small business myself, getting larger every day.
Now, on to the George Soros point. When is that guy going to give us money, man?
I know. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it.
Became familiar not with his face, but with his name, because when I was working with the FBI and going through all these Turkey CIA operations, Gladio B operations, related files with persons of interest who were targets of these investigations, the name Cenk Uygur began popping, not at any high level, main target level. He was more of a lower level, parasitic, criminally connected guy with shady Turkish Israeli organizations that were operating for this particular operation from late 1990s until at least the time that I was fired from the FBI, which was 2002. I was not surprised when he began disinformation campaign and sabotage against my case during my whistleblowing journey. This is during the period between 2004 and 2008, because he knew that I knew, because I had been speaking about and talking about some of the facts, some of the involved organizations, front organizations. Some of them were Turkish organizations. Well, he was involved, Cenk Uygur, again, as a rat, as a lower level rat, nobody significant. But when you're looking at the petty criminal in the bottom of the chain, parasitic guy, that's what he was.
So let me add something to this question, and you can respond to it if you want to, but Cenk referenced Paul Ryan. When the Republicans took control of Congress, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, famously said, we need to switch from being an opposition party to being a proposition party. So what's your evaluation, Ben, of their efforts in that direction to unite the party and move legislation forward?
I mean, we all have eyes. They suck at it. I mean, and Paul Ryan is not exactly my go-to guy when it comes to political acumen and genius. So I'd more want to respond to some of the contentions that Cenk was making about Medicare for all and single-payer health care. A couple of things. One, when you say we pay for it, that's not technically true. The idea that everybody who's paying into Medicaid paid for it and now they get out what they paid in is obviously not true. It is a redistributive program, and to pretend otherwise is just silly. The people who are paying the payroll taxes are not the people who are taking out through Medicaid, obviously.
Can I just address that super quick? So if we're talking about Medicare, right? Not Medicaid.
Right.
So in Medicare, so you're both correct and incorrect. So it's not like I put in $20 and I get $20 back. That part is true.
Right.
But we all pay into Medicare together, and then we all get it when we are sick.
Can I ask you a question? I have two questions. Really, serious questions. One, what is your ideal tax rate? Because it's going to cost a lot of money for a lot of this stuff. And two, what is your ideal level of medical care? Because the fact is that we can spend millions of dollars on people at end-of-life care. We can spend millions of dollars on surgeries and preventative care. I mean, healthcare is an expensive business, even under a single-payer system, which is why generally you end up with rationing. So what is your ideal level of healthcare that is provided to everyone, and what sort of tax rate are you proposing to subsidize that?
Yeah. So those are very, very fair questions.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
So let's talk about taxes for a second. So conservatives agree or say all the time that
Take your pick, Billy boy.
The golden era of America was the 1950s and 1960s. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. Our economy was booming at the time, and we became the #1 economy in the world at that time. The tax rate for the highest bracket fluctuated between 70 and 91%. So that is when we were at our best. Now, I want to be clear. I'm also a businessman, and boy, that seems high. It does, okay? And one of the reasons my family were Republicans when I was growing up was because before Reagan came in,
and then you have to look at this guy's pattern, okay?
So
I mean, when you look at this buffoon, this guy went from ultra-conservative, like heavily Republican, ultra-conservative. We are looking at the level of Rush Limbaugh conservative, and boom, overnight, this guy became a liberal progressive. You know, he was reborn as liberal progressive. The same thing, I mean, the same pattern repeats itself again. This guy went from, hey, I'm the little alternative guy, I'm anti-establishment, I'm anti-system, to a guy who began ass-kissing, kissing so many asses and begging in order to land a job with mainstream media, MSNBC. You know, it's interesting. You see the parallels between this guy and Arianna Huffington. Of course, Huffington always was at a higher level. As I said, this buffoon is like a lower-level petty guy. But Arianna Huffington had the same thing. And she used to be this very, very conservative, ultra-conservative Republican who suddenly was reborn, and this is Arianna Huffington, and became this progressive liberal.
No problem.
So all this sounds great, except for the fact that Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security eat up 66% of the federal budget every single year. The idea that all of these socialized medicine countries have it so much better than we do, particularly in terms of cancer care, is a joke. We are still #1 in terms of 5-year cancer survival rate here in the United States.
Hey, yo. You win.
And when you talk about top marginal tax rates in the 1950s, there are a couple things that are worth noting. One, that was top individual marginal tax rates, not necessarily the business tax rate. We now have some of the highest corporate tax rates altogether in the industrialized world. And if you would prefer for us to destroy half of the world before we become the only country that didn't have its industrial capacity destroyed, which is what happened in the 1940s, leading to us being the only productive country on planet Earth, essentially, for the next 2 decades, I'm not with you there. I'm not really in favor of having a giant world war that destroys all industrial capacity across the West, so that we're the only people who actually have the capacity to produce anything and just markets that we can provide to.
Right. So, first of all, it is fair to say that, of course, the 1950s and 60s were different. We'd just come out of the war. So
well, when you look at Cenk Uygur, you would see that he was dancing under the same tunes as the CIA and Fethullah Gülen. And by the way, Cenk Uygur has always been serving this mullah, this Islamist mullah Fethullah Gülen and his network. Without their blessing, he wouldn't have gotten where he has gotten, considering his dim wit and the kind of stature he had. You see that exactly at the same time, he switches position. Again, look at the pattern. I'm a Republican, ultra-conservative. I am a Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton lover Democrat. Oops, no, I'm a progressive liberal, and I'm supporting Bernie Sanders. I'm pro-Erdogan. Ooh, no. Now that CIA and Fethullah Gülen changed course, now I am anti-Erdogan. I am an alternative guy. Oops, I went there and kissed asses and sold everything I've got, which is not much for this buffoon, and I landed a job with the NBC, MSNBC. What happened to the guy who was so anti-mainstream media? So I am not surprised that you know, a guy like that, the buffoon like that, is getting money, whether it's from people like George Soros foundations or through companies and mega corporations that are intimately tied to partisan politics of Democrats versus Republican or vice versa. In his case, he is intimately tied to the Democratic campaign, and they have now, I mean, if you go and look at the headlines, you will see that they're increasing their lobby expenditure. This is for the Democrats, okay? With Russiagate and George Soros is in this group, and if you look at the latest headlines, they are pouring more money into various
redistribution.
propaganda
They took your
left
wealth and
outlets.
redistributed it to them.
Well, this guy receives this $20 million. Why? You should ask yourself
Ben, I'll
why
let
a
you
buffoon
respond
like
to that.
that would receive this level of
and then I'll
money.
be done with this because we can do healthcare for 8 hours here. But two things. One, I'd like to know which tax deduction, when people say tax loopholes, a tax loophole is just a tax deduction that's available to everyone, and some people take advantage of it and some people don't. I can't take advantage of certain corporate tax deductions because my business isn't in those businesses, for example. I'm sort of with you in the sense that I'm not in favor of tax deductions. I'm in favor of a lower tax rate and get rid of a lot of the tax deductions because I think that it's ridiculous that we have people gaming the system. That said, I'd like to know which tax deductions you'd like to do away with. And I'd like to know also when you say that corporations pay 10% of the taxes, right, and individuals pay the other 90%, okay, so that means the taxes are still getting paid to a higher rate than we ever have in our history in terms of the tax revenue to the government. The amount of tax revenue to the government right now is trillions of dollars every year. And final point here, you elided this question by saying we can learn stuff from Japan. The standard of care is the entire question when it comes to single-payer health care. That is the entire thing. If people felt like they were going to get the same access to care in a single-payer healthcare system as they did in a system where they can pay their own way, then we would have no controversy here. But the fact is that rationing is mandated as soon as you start having the government run the healthcare system and decide what level of care people get. So I don't want anyone deciding what level of care that I can get. I don't want anyone else to. They don't care about me. They don't know my child's name. They don't know my name. All they know is how much I cost. I mean, Ezekiel Emanuel's at least honest about this. Ezekiel Emanuel comes out and says, listen, I want to die at 70, right? I want to die at 80. That's fine with me. I'd rather die at that. Well, that's good for him. But if I don't want to die at 80, or I don't want my father to die at 80, it's none of his damn business.
We don't need another hero.